House will come to order. Members will be at their seats. The clerk is open roll and you may record your presence. Please rise and give your attention to our guest chaplain, Representative Stephen Johnson, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Representative Blex.
Gracious God, we have so much for which to be thankful. We are thankful to be here. We are thankful for all you have given us. We pray that your providence be with those fighting in Ukraine, that your kingdom may be established and prevail there and throughout the world. May we all continually consider how our actions and words serve your kingdom above our earthly kingdoms. Today we pray again for our sister Eunice, that your healing hand is upon her. In our journey together to the stars, we can only make it with your great love and guidance. When hate, envy, or deceit wells within or around us, help us to instead reflect your love, understanding, and truth. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Has every member had the opportunity to record their presence? The clerk will close the roll and record the attendance. The Speaker recognizes Representative Delberdang on a point of personal privilege. Stand. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body, I stand here today to address an event that happened a little over a year ago. We all know why I didn't do this a year ago, but a lot has transpired since then. On August 29th, 2020, we had a Sedgwick County 911 dispatch that was advised of a person going the wrong way on K96 northwest of Wichita. Minutes later, police units were advised of a head-on collision out on K96. Officer Ohlmeyer arrived on the scene to find two vehicles fully engulfed in flames with drivers trapped inside. Officer Ohlmeyer accessed the vehicles and removed the drivers. During this incident, one of the vehicles had small explosions that was suspected to be ammunition going off. Once the drivers were removed from the vehicles and Officer Ohlmeyer and other first responders were attending to the driver's needs, during this time, a third vehicle with an intoxicated driver ran directly into the emergency scene at highway speeds, ultimately killing one of the original drivers. I wanted to bring Officer Ohlmeyer before the legislature to recognize him for his heroic efforts that August evening. So I contacted his chief, Mark Hinkle, who stands with me now, and this was meant to be a surprise to Officer Ohlmeyer, but plans changed. Officer Ohlmeyer contracted COVID-19 on December 4th. By December 7th, he was in the hospital, and by the morning of December 8th, he had passed. With me today is Officer Ohlmeyer's daughter, Elizabeth Hemingway, who is a police officer in St. Louis. We also have his other daughter, Lindsay, and his sister, Kay Ohlmeyer, with us. And I asked them and Chief Mark Hinkle if they would come to Topeka today to stand before you as I present a recognition to Officer Olemeyer for his actions on the evening of August 29th, 2020. So if the body would stand in recognition, I would appreciate it. Mr. Speaker, I ask that my words be spread across the journal.
Without objection, so ordered. Introductions of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2735 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning economic development, enacting the Right to Start Act relating to tax incentives for new businesses, reducing the first $100,000 of new business income included in a taxpayer's Kansas adjusted gross income by 20% for the first 3 tax years in the taxpayer's business in operation, reducing the income tax on eligible new corporations to 3% of the first 3 years of such eligible corporation for the first $100,000 of income, requiring the Department of Administration to make certain reports to the Legislature, establishing the Office of Entrepreneurship within the Department of Commerce.
Messages from the Senate. The clerk will read.
Announcing passage of House Bills 2329 and 2594.
House Bill 2710 appears on the consent calendar for the 3rd day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it will be advanced to final action. Final action on bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2710 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning alcoholic beverages, increasing the percentage of alcohol by volume in domestic table wine and domestic fortified wine.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2710. The clerk will open roll, and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Ellis votes no. Further changes. Representative Burris votes no. With 116 voted in favor and 3 against the passage of House Bill 2710, the same time receive a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2548 by the Joint Committee on Information Technology, an act concerning information technology relating to information technology projects and reporting requirements, information technology security training, and cybersecurity reports requiring certain information to be provided to the Joint Committee on Information Technology.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2548. The clerk will open the roll, and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record the vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Representative Estes votes aye. Further changes. With 116 voted in favor or 3 against the passage of House Bill 2548, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Concurrent Resolution Number 5027 by Representatives Berquist, Bergkamp, and others. A concurrent resolution applying to the Congress of the United States to call a convention of the states for the purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution of the United States that impose limits on the federal government.
This constitutes final action on HCR 5027. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record the vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Representative Collins for an explanation of vote. Seeing 10 hands, the call is in order. The doorman will close the doors. Members will be in their seats. Seeing 10 hands, the call is still in order. For an explanation of vote, Representative Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Congress, whenever two-thirds of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to the Constitution, or on the application of the legislatures of two-thirds of several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments. I voted against HCR 5027 because it will not do what some claim and rule in Congress. If the required number of states pass an Article 5 resolution, it will be Congress who calls the convention and makes the rules. There are too many unanswered questions now about how it will work, and I do not want to bet our Constitution to find out. I vote no on HCR 5027.
Back on the call of House, the clerk will call the roll.
Representative Carlin, Representative Coleman, Representative Donahoe, Representative Finney, Representative Potter Partial, Representative Rogers.
Any further explanation of votes? Representative Carlson, your light's on. Do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker. I voted yes for this bill, not because I want to. My conscience and everything that I understand about it, I want to vote no. I don't think it's the time. I don't think it's the time in our nation to add another level of bureaucracy and things like that, another level of political things. How do we know who is going to be appointed to attend our convention of states? How do we know that big money won't affect them as it has a lot of other things? How can we control that any more than we control Washington, D.C. right now? I feel like there are other ways to do it without changing our Constitution. Now, I voted for this because I was elected
Representative, your time's expired. Thank you.
I voted. Constituents asked me to, and so I voted for it. Thank you.
Further explanation of vote. Representative Prost.
Mr. Speaker, between debate and independent research, I cannot in good conscience support HCR 5027. The evidence is clear that an Article 5 convention will grant unmitigated power to a dysfunctional and untrustworthy Congress to determine the scope, rules, and mechanics of any proceeding. Kansas will cede its sovereignty to some unknowable future body while abandoning the enduring security of our Constitution. A better America isn't found in wholesale rewriting of a document penned by brilliant minds guided by Providence. It lies in our shared sense of civic duty, community, and faith in our ability to build a more perfect union. Representative Probst.
For their explanation of vote, Representative Samsel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Between yesterday's vote and right now, I received 269 emails from supporters of the Convention of States. The tone of many of those emails are disturbing, and it further underscores why, if we're going to do this, it needs to be done by partisan fashion with co-sponsors on both sides of the aisle. Thank you.
For their explanation. Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Not seeing 10 hands, the call is raised. With 76 voted in favor and 43 against the passage of HCR 5027, the same having not received a constant majority, the bill is hereby declared lost. The clerk will record the vote. The chair recognizes Majority Leader Hawkins for a motion to resolve into the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of considering those items under the heading of General Orders.
You for the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, the motion carries. The chair appoints Representative Hoffman to chair the Committee of the Whole.
All right, good morning, everyone. First order of business is Senate Bill 2. For the purpose of carrying Senate Bill 2, the chair recognizes Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were committee amendments, and I move the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Committee report is adopted. You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 2 is a bill expanding the area of the Kansas State Fair where alcohol can be consumed. It passed the Senate last year, 31-8. Currently, beer and wine are available at the State Fair in Hutchinson, but only in a designated beer garden. Senate Bill 2 was requested by the State Fair Board and expands the possible area for alcohol consumption. It was based on the success of other Midwestern state fairs like Iowa and Minnesota, who had made beer and wine more accessible at their fairgrounds. The original request was just for wine and beer, but the House Fed and State amended it to include other alcoholic liquor. Though this is merely permissive language, the State Fair Board still will make the final call as to what they deem appropriate. The bill also designates 70% of the liquor taxes from the fair sales to go to the State Fair Board's Capital Improvement Fund. The remaining 30% goes to the State General Fund. This should add about $30,000 to $50,000 annually in much-needed funds to the State Fair Capital Fund. In addition, the Fed and State Committee added another amendment, this one detailing statewide that regarding temporary alcohol permits, it sets a maximum one-day fee of $25 and allows a single entity up to 12 temporary permits a year rather than the previous 4 permits annually. Senate Bill 2 had 2 proponents in committee and no opponents. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I am open for questions.
Does anyone wish to speak on the bill? Chair recognizes Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill, just depending on where you're looking at, is a good bill. It's pretty non-controversial. People wanted to have more wine and more outlets at the state fairgrounds. The one thing that came into really was not a surprise that they also wanted spirits. One lady said she wanted to be able to walk around looking at the animals and different things with a daiquiri. So the amendment was added to add spirits to this bill. I was just asked if I was going to specifically mention margaritas up here, but I told no, I think that's a given. So I want to be clear now. I stand in support of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes Representative Helgerson.
Some of you know that I'm at the state fair on a daily basis. We've had the contract for drapes and tables, et cetera, for 50, well, I'm 70, 60 years. I know that this is a proposal that the board is pushing. I know that they're trying to come up with additional revenue. I know that other states have gone to this, but I also want to point out that River Festival in Wichita has gone to this idea of having people walking around drinking and trying to bring in more crowds. I think it's failed miserably. I think it's failed because you've lost a lot of the population who don't want their kids and families around the open drinking that our state fair has been about. So while I may be alone in this, I think that ultimately it's better not to have alcohol, to accept that we may not have the revenue. The alcohol then is contained in certain areas, and it still provides them an opportunity for additional revenue. But I don't think this is the direction we should be heading with our state fair.
For further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Landwehr.
As a person that spends one of her vacation weeks at the fair out on the campgrounds, I've had the opportunity to observe a lot of different things, and I appreciate what the previous representative said, but there's already drinking and going around the fairgrounds currently. They just bring them in their purses or their coolers, etc. This here will add, because it's one of the complaints that we hear. I do talk to a lot of people when I'm out there. Is one of the complaints that we hear that they have to sit somewhere all day long, and they probably actually drink more if they're just sitting there and they can just walk back up and get another one, get another one, get another one. So I would rise in support of this. Let's bring more revenue, and then I think we can also monitor it a lot better. So please vote yes.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Wagner, you may close.
I appreciate the comments from the colleagues. I know the State Fair Board itself is very concerned about always keeping the family-friendly nature of the State Fair. And again, this is just permissive language that allows them to move forward at their discretion. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee arises and reports, that we report Senate Bill number 2 as amended favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Wagner to report Senate Bill 2 favorable. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Motion passes. Next up is House Bill 2462. For the purposes of carrying House Bill 2462, the chair recognizes Representative Haswood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. HB 2462 would amend law to remove committee membership requirements for legislators appointed to the Joint Committee on State-Tribal Relations. So under current law, legislators appointed to the Joint Committee on State-Tribal Relations must be selected from memberships of standing committees on the House side, Federal and State Affairs, and Judiciary, and House Committee on Taxation. On Senate side, Senate Committee on Assessment and Taxation. And last year, this provided to be, this bill is going to smooth over the process. Sharing my personal experience last year, we had to temporarily remove some folks from the standing committees that I was not on previously for me to order to attend the state tribal committee for that day. This bill would also smooth over that process, and the purpose of this joint committee was to address the casino compacts with the tribal casinos. It had its time and place back then, but moving forward in the legislature, this would be in just a bump in the road. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
For the discussion, Chair recognizes Representative Arnberger Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The carrier did a great job explaining the bill and ask that you support it. Thank you.
For further discussion, the Chair recognizes Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a long time coming for this bill, just to eliminate some of the bureaucracy that transpired in the past to put people who were qualified to serve on this committee. I stand in full support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Haswood, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee rises and reports HB 2462 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Haswood to report House Bill 2462 favorable. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Our next bill is Senate Bill 421. To carry Senate Bill 421, Chair recognizes Representative Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I'd move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Committee report is adopted. You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 421 would send another $1 billion to KPERS to further pay down the unfunded liability and to eliminate the layered payments that were made previously. So the first $253.9 million would go to eliminate the layered payments. There's been great agreement on that across this building. That is how Senate Bill 421 came to us. It did pass unanimously in the Senate. There's another bill winding its way through the Senate, which would appropriate $1 billion to KPERS, as this bill does as it came out of committee. The key effort to that is to look at how do we continue to make progress, and this body has made great progress on stabilizing the fund and reducing future costs to taxpayers, which is our key challenge. With this funding, in addition to eliminating the layered payments, we would exceed 80% funded for the first time in many years. 80.8 is the calculation, but there's been more market up to the end of the year. Now there's market down since then and some other things. So exceeding 80% is the baseline to start with. The next piece, and the key piece in looking at these dollars coming from the one-time monies that we have in the state general fund in the last year for revenue, is to look at applying that. The reduction in next year's all funds commitment is just under 82 million. That grows to just under 90 million per year as we go forward over the next 5 years. So it creates a significant savings for us that we can continue to use going forward. Helps to, again, eliminate that portion of the debt, would take our school group for a liability from just under $5 billion to $4.25 billion, and helps us financially as we move forward. So with that, I'm happy to stand for questions.
For discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Waymaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in regards to Senate Bill 421, I mean, this is one of the things that we've been talking about since the beginning of the 2022 legislative session, which we've been trying to identify what we want to spend money on in regards to the surplus that we're currently experiencing with the state budget. So having an amount that goes towards basically debt that we have accumulated over the last few years is a purposeless way of addressing the surplus. However, I do have some concerns in regards to the language that passed out of the committee on the House side in regards to $253 million approximately being specified with employer contributions from the K through 12 education system, because that may make us non-compliant with something that was passed as a clause from Congress in regards to what we refer to as the maintenance of effort. And so if we have that amount of dollars going through in one budget year and we don't in the subsequent budget years, we could actually find ourselves non-compliant with the maintenance of effort with the federal government. And so therefore, I have an amendment.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
Page 1, line 16, by striking $746,133,978 and inserting $1 billion. In line 21, before the period, by inserting, provided that the first $253,866,022 of such transfer shall be for the full payment of the reduced employer contributions from participating employers under KSA 744931 and amendments thereto in fiscal years 2017 and 2019, and striking all in lines 22 through 31. Renumber sections accordingly on page 1 in the title, in line 4 by striking all after 2022, in line 5 by striking all before the semicolon.
You wish to further explain, Representative?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So basically what this amendment does is it changes the dollar amount to the total figure of $1 billion that's going to be transferred to the unfunded liability, and negates the language that there is going to be specific employer contributions that, like I mentioned before when I was explaining my amendment, could have us non-compliant with the maintenance effort piece that was passed by Congress. So I'll stand for questions in regards to the amendment.
On the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a good amendment. In either way that we do it, it eliminates the layered payments, and that's our goal. And I appreciate the Chair of Appropriations looking at how that funding works now, and particularly in the future, and giving us some guidance. So I'm happy to support the amendment, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Yeah, Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our original goal in this was to pay off the layering issues, but we did hear from our budget director that in order to follow the money, it was important to have a path where we could say that we had repaid that, and it has to do with clean, transparent bookkeeping. So I will leave it to the body on what you would like to do. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Seeing none, Representative Waymaster, you may close.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I've explained the amendment and what the consequences could be by having specific employer contributions listed in this bill, and what those complications could be in future years in regards to the budget for the state of Kansas due to laws that were passed by the federal government. So therefore, Mr. Chairman, I close.
You've heard the motion by Representative Waymaster to amend. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. We're back on the bill. Chair now recognizes Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The carrier of the bill did an excellent job in explaining the details. There are a lot of details and moving parts to this bill, and I would appreciate your support. I think it's important that we get rid of the layering and the interest that we've been paying for 2017 and 2019. So I think those are the primary things that I truly support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Representative Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Body, this is not our money. This surplus that we keep calling it is not our money. This is the taxpayers' money in the state of Kansas. And the governor has objected to some tax cuts because she says this is one-time money. Well, I think that this bill is a great bill. This is a great way to turn one-time money into every year money. $82 million in the first year and then 90-some million in subsequent years of savings for the state of Kansas. I had research, do a little bit of studying. That's a 0.1% decrease in the income taxes of every Kansan in the state if we were to translate this into tax cuts for Kansans. So I support this bill, but I hope that we are going to take that savings and give it back to Kansans and not just spend it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to support this, and the reason being is we've just heard that we have this additional revenue, and the prior representative just said it's the taxpayers' money. So why don't we give it back to taxpayers now? So my suggestion would be, instead of, I've not received, I don't know about you, I've not received any emails from my constituents demanding for this, demanding that we pay off some of the unfunded liability. They're not worried about that at this point in time. What they're worried about is, how about a cost of living increase for retirees that they haven't received for I don't know how many years? I get a number of emails from my constituents concerning that. I've received a number of emails about axe the tax, sales tax on food. Let's do something about it. Let's take it down to zero. So I look at what my constituents are asking for, and that's what I'm here for. And I can't support this bill. Let's just go ahead, excuse me, and layer the payments, and let's utilize this money and do some good for our constituents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the comments from the previous representative. I also hear quite frequently about a cost of living adjustment. It's almost like he's my John Stockton, so as his Carl Malone, I have an amendment.
The amendment appears lengthy. Is there a objection to waiving the reading of the amendment? Oh, yeah, let's explain first. You go ahead and explain, Representative. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a cost of living adjustment and striking the $746 million part of this bill. From my perspective, from looking at the original base bill, I appreciate the intent, but I see a couple of problems. So 100% of the payment being made is from SGF, but only 85% of the benefit is going to come from SGF. And really, when you look at it, it only pulls forward the final payoff by 2 years. And so when you're looking at a $746 million payment to put us from really, really good shape, and again, we're going to be 80% funded by next year, into really, really, really good shape, I don't know that investment is apt for where we are right now. What is apt, and what I do hear a lot about, is a cost of living adjustment for our retirees, and so that is what this amendment does.
All right, now is there an objection to waiving the reading? There is an objection. Clerk will read.
Page 1, by striking all lines 11 through 21 and inserting new section 1A, the retirement benefit, pension, or annuity payments accruing after June 30, 2022 to each retirant shall be increased by a cost of living adjustment in an amount as provided in subsection B. Such payment shall be paid by the retirement system to the retirant. B, number 1, except as provided in paragraph 2, each retirant who is entitled to receive a retirement benefit, pension, or annuity payment from the retirement system on July 1, 2022 shall have such retirement benefit, pension, or annuity increased in accordance with the following schedule. For those retirants whose date of retirement is A, on or before July 1, 2017, such benefit, pension, or annuity payment shall be increased 1% of the retirement benefit, pension, or annuity payment in effect on July 1, 2022. B, on or before July 1, 2014, such benefit, pension, or annuity payment shall be increased 2% of the retirement benefit, pension, or annuity payment in effect on July 1, 2022. C, on or before July 1, 2011, such benefit, pension, or annuity payment shall be increased 3% of the retirement benefit, pension, or annuity payment in effect on July 1, 2022. D, on or before July 1, 2008, such benefit, pension, or annuity payment shall be increased 4% of the retirement benefit, pension, or annuity. E, on or before July 1, 2005, such benefit, pension, or annuity payment shall be increased 5% of the retirement benefit. Number 2, in no event shall the increase in the monthly benefit amount provided by this section exceed $200. C, as used in this section. Number 1, insured disability benefit recipient means any person receiving an insured disability benefit under KSA 744927 and amendment.
Objection has been waived. Representative Hsu, would you like to explain further? Representative Hsu, would you like to explain even further?
Yeah, so this is a graduated. So for retirees who have been retired more than 5 years, they would get a benefit, like the clerk said, 1% from 6 to 8 years, 2% from 9 to 11 years, and so on. So this would act as to fund this, it would be a one-time lump sum of $238 million. Again, this $238 million is essentially just replacing the $746 million from the original bill, leaving in total about $500 million of savings from the original bill, but also being able to provide a COLA. With that, I'll stand for questions.
For discussion on the amendment, Chair recognizes Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the discussion. This is an important topic that definitely matters to a lot of people. And the challenge between doing everything that we are asked and what we are able to within the constraints that are there. In the bill, as I understand the amendment, we take out the money above the layered payment and then add a cost of living adjustment rather than doing that, which I think does a couple of things. One of the things that people have asked for over time is having a sustainable pension fund, but I don't think anybody really knows what that means or looks like. When I grant an additional benefit and actually reduce the amount going in, I'm getting further away from making sure that the equation balances. And that's what we always want to be careful of. And one of the things that we've talked about is, should we decide to give an additional benefit, whatever it is, the cost of living is a justifiable thing for us to consider, along with all of the other host of things that we consider in appropriations and other committees of what do we want to do, where do we want to direct those funds. But to do that we also necessarily have to define what tax revenues are dedicated to meet that expenditure. And in particular, when that cost is ongoing beyond one time, having clarity towards that. So while I think the question is a good one to ask, it cannot be asked without first making sure that the fund is sound, which we are only getting to the precipice of reaching that before stepping back further. And secondly, looking at specifically how we meet that allocation as it goes forward. Given that this particular bill does have the piece of saying we would put money into capers, I'm not sure that dealing with how we might take more money out fits specifically to the bill, and I would challenge the germaneness of the amendment.
Germaneness of the amendment has been asked for. The Rules Chair will please make a ruling.
I'll be glad to give him whatever you are ready.
Chair recognizes Representative Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We looked at the bill and the amendment. The bill is about, it's an appropriations bill with money going into CAPERS. It talks a lot about actuaries, evaluations, contributions, you know, the stuff that the carrier of the bill finds interesting. The rest of us don't find very interesting. The amendment deals with money going out of the system. And when I walked back there, I thought we were going to have a hard time finding it germane because I saw it as money coming in and money going out. We just had a pretty good conversation back there. Both are appropriations. They both deal with well, it's an appropriation bill is where you start right there. The amendment deals with the appropriation of money differently than the bill itself would. They both deal with CAPERS, and so we have found the amendment to be germane.
It's the Rules Chair's ruling that the amendment is germane. Is there a challenge to the Rules Chair? Seeing no challenge, we're back on the amendment. To further speak on the amendment, the Chair recognizes Representative Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of the amendment. The underlying $253 million of getting rid of the layering is very, very important. And after we do that, and with the other changes we've made, CAPERS will be at 80.3% funded next year. So we're reaching that fully funded level at 80%. What the current underlying bill does, it adds another $746 million into CAPERS, but that doesn't, you know, when I'm looking at how we spend our money, that doesn't get us much. We're already going to be fully funded without that $746 million next year. And all it does is reduce the unfunded liability payoff by 2 years. That's a lot of money for a pretty small benefit. So what this amendment does, instead of spending $746 million, it only spends $238 million. So we're spending a lot less. There's still $500 million left in the budget. It takes that $238 million to fund the one-time COLA. And the amendment is the same as House Bill 2548, I think that's the number. And that was introduced, and it provides a one-time COLA, and it's graduated so that those employees for 0 to 5 years wouldn't get an increase, 6 to 8 years would get a 1% increase, and it goes up to eventually those that are retired 18 years or more would get a 5% COLA increase. Our state employees, retirees, have not had a COLA increase since 1998. You know, when I was here the first time, we gave several COLA increases. I left after the 98 session, and that was the last time they got one. We did do an extra payment, I think one time, like a 13th payment in the 2000s, but that's the last time they've had any increase. So they've been on a fixed income as prices have gone up and things have cost more money. We have the ability now to give them that one-time increase. $238 million is what it cost. I think that's a better use of this money than this taking $746 million and not really getting as much. So we have a chance to help a lot of our retirees across the state. There's 82,000 that would qualify for this. So to help 82,000 of our hardworking state employees that have been retired, living on a fixed income, have been asking for some kind of increase for years, we finally have an opportunity to do that. I'd urge you to support this amendment.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Estes.
Will the carrier of the amendment stand for questions, please? Thank you. What is the annual cost?
Of a COLA?
Yes.
My understanding is about $19-ish million a year, and so the 238 one-time payment essentially just kind of pays for it over time. So it would really just be the one-time payment.
What's the total fiscal note?
So just for the COLA portion of this, it's a one-time $238 million payment.
238.
38.
238 million. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. To me, that's not a small amount of money, and the reason I like the underlying bill is because it helps us to get capers on solid ground. There was a point in time when we were the 49th worst state in the nation. We were glad to see Illinois. We've moved up that list to about 34th, and we've made a lot of progress. Here we are in a time where inflation is going up. We really are at risk for a recession, and I think it makes sense for us to do what we can do to shore up capers and reduce the cost of government so that we can weather whatever comes forward. Thank you.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would support this amendment. I think all of us here have gotten many emails about a COLA amendment. I too have concerns about what the cost would be, but what we do know about this is that the average payment for a CAPERS retiree is about $1,200 a month. It doesn't amount to a whole lot. There have been COLAs in the past, and I believe the last one was 24 years. So this is something that they have been asking for years. They have been compiling information. The other thing we know is, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but something in the range of 84% of these people live in Kansas. So whatever they get in this COLA, they spend in Kansas. So I think for these reasons, I would support this amendment, and I believe it would be very helpful to the people of Kansas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will be brief, but I rise in support of this. I have a lot of people in the district that I represent that are CAPERS recipients. And this is one thing that even when I'm out walking my dog that I get stopped and asked about is there any possibility of a COLA for CAPERS recipients? And so this is very much a priority for a lot of the folks that I represent, and so I rise in support and encourage you to do so. They deserve, 1998, that's a long time. They deserve an increase, a COLA increase, and you know what? That helps, that money stays within our economy and it actually helps our state. So I encourage you to support this.
Chair recognizes Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will the carrier of the amendment stand for questions?
Certainly.
Okay. One of the things I wasn't clear on, because I know the original bill that we brought today was using one-time money, and we had not defined any other source for money coming in. How does this work differently? Because if you're going to give a COLA, it continues. So can you give us a breakdown on what it's going to cost, and are we able to maintain? I'm not against a COLA at all, and I totally support giving a COLA. It hasn't happened for many, many years. And so, but I would like a little bit more in-depth information on approximately what it would cost and how you expect to use those fees. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. So again, like the underlying bill, this is still a one-time payment out of SGF to fund this COLA, and how the COLA works. So the COLA itself is going to cost roughly $19 to $20 million a year. That's how much it costs. And so by making this one-time payment of $238 million, it essentially funds the life of the COLA. So it is a one-time payment, but funds COLAs in perpetuity for the retirees.
And if I may ask one more, it looks like you have a cap in there. Can you explain what that cap is so that we understand how much it could mean or not mean?
Yep, so there is a monthly benefit cap of $200 within this. So if the 5% increase that you might get from this COLA would be $205, you would still only receive $200 extra in that month.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My main concern was, is it sustainable? Because I didn't want to put some false hope in the hands of those who are most deserving and then sometime down the road not be able to fund that. So I think the carrier of the amendment has explained that, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Representative Landwehr.
One of the problems with a COLA is a defined benefit. It's just that, it's defined. That means the day you sign up for CAPERS, whatever they told you your benefits would be, that's what you're guaranteed, no matter what the market does. And we hear people say that, well, we have to get a COLA, it's our money. Everybody else gets a COLA. But that's one of the reasons that we're also been dealing with the deficit. We have bonded CAPERS twice. Bonded, we're paying interest payments. I don't know how many times we gave a 13th check. And unless you're sitting here today on CAPERS currently, you don't get this COLA. It's only the current retirees. The private sector doesn't have a defined benefit, and a lot of units of government have gone away from it because it's unaffordable. It's one of the reasons that we now have the new tier system that CAPERS has. The letters I get are from teachers that say, I'm a new teacher, and I don't think that this retirement plan is worth it anymore. Maybe that's the thing that we look at. If we're really looking out for those that are going to be retiring versus the retirees. I received CAPERS today. It'll be a nice bonus for me, but it won't for those of you that aren't on CAPERS today. And then when we go back into the hole and we're sitting underfunded, we're going to be back here just like we've done it twice. So the first time we bonded, we said this should be it. This should take care of it. I don't remember if you were still here or not the first time we bonded. Well, that first time didn't take care of it. We bonded a second time. And if I recall, I'd have to check with the actuaries. I don't believe it was anywhere near the interest rates we've seen this last year. They're pretty substantial payments. If they want to, if retirees want to roll with the market, then you do a 401k. And roll with the market, win and lose. But because it's a defined benefit, the market goes down, you don't lose a penny. Unlike your other constituents that are not state employees, the market goes down, they lose. It makes a lot more sense. Our payment can be smaller. We're going to hit here, not too far from now, $1 billion a year CAPERS payment. $1 billion. At last count, we had 3 recipients that receive over $1 million a year in CAPERS payments. Put that 5% on top of that. So I ask you today that we don't support this. Let's shore it up so that when things drop, because we're headed for another recession, folks. There's no other way around it. When the money's not there, you're going to be back here bonding it, and you're going to be charging your other taxpayers, not your state employees so much, but your other taxpayer and your state employees are going to be paying interest on that COLA that you gave them. So I ask that you vote no and make it a balanced financial, fiscal, proper decision.
Chair recognizes Representative Heiberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you might guess, this is a big issue in my district. I have a lot of retired university employees. We made a commitment to these folks. a lot of the folks who were on capers in my district, they didn't have a 401k option. I was really glad for it was pointed out that we haven't had a COLA increase since 1998. I don't know about you, but I'd have a really hard time living now on, well, actually my income now is less than what it was in 1998 because I took this job. But for most people, they'd have a hard time living on now on what they lived on in 1998. I'm really glad for the representative pointed out the fact that we may be facing some inflation in the upcoming years. I think that's even more reason to adopt this now because there's a bigger need for our beneficiaries on capers. And it also means we'll be paying our contributions in upcoming years with inflated dollars, which will make it easier to make our payments. So please support the hardworking state employees of Kansas who've retired, counting on us. Please support the COLA.
To speak for a second time, the chair recognizes Representative Steve Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the discussion. A really important issue and constituent groups that are very important to the state, were important to the state, and will be going forward. A lot of points that are central to the issues that we're concerned about. I want to start with not putting in $746 million isn't a big deal. It is a $5 billion liability. It is still the biggest liability that we have. This would be the largest effort we have ever made towards funding capers. We made a larger effort towards changing future liabilities, but this is the largest effort. Bonding was a huge effort. It has helped us to attune larger than we expected that it would have over time, but the cumulative value of all of those bonds just broke $1 billion at the higher market value. That saved interest rate. That saved us 60, maybe 65 million a year in expenses, which was great. But it did not change debt. I moved it from one place to another. Great move. Absolutely want to refinance anywhere and anytime I can. This reduces debt. And that is an enormous change in looking at a liability. And there is no two ways about that particular thing. Now, that doesn't necessarily get to the question of whether I grant an additional benefit, right? But that additional benefit, I need to be clear. Am I just doing this for the state local, and the KP&F, and the judges plan? Because that's the fiscal note that you got. There's also a fiscal note, I believe it would extend to the local group. It may not. But if it extends to the local group, you've got a larger fiscal note than what was disclosed by probably just short of another $100 million on that group. They have to pay it. It would not be SGF. So you could say it's not our problem. But we have to look at all of the liability that we create through that policy at each step along the way. Are our retirees deserving of consideration? Absolutely. Their work I very much appreciate. I also appreciate the work of our current employees. Our current employees pay 6% to get a 4% guarantee with a fraction of the market performance going forward. So there is some element of that market performance that affects them. It won't be too bad for the next few years because the returns have been pretty good. But again, I'm paying 50% more to get a guarantee that's half as much. Doesn't make that right or wrong, but as I look at equity across my generations of workers, and I pay for this over generations as well, I want to make sure that I consider current workers as well and say, what is the value that we get for what we pay? And if I add another $300 million in liability, I will be expecting those current workers through their taxes and everyone else that's a taxpayer to pay that liability. Does not make it wrong. It just needs to be expressly part of our plan. That is why the bill is in the Appropriations Committee to be considered with the various things that we might wish to say, this, among many other things, is a valid thing to be considered. Where do we then move forward as we try and make those decisions? there is a sentiment, it hasn't been talked about a lot, but it says, well, the thing did 26%. Surely we can get that. Again, defined benefit. Equations have to balance. And if I put an element in an equation that says I get part of the upside performance, the balance to that is I must have something that gives relief in the downside performance. If you look at the returns in 2008 and 2009, how do I then adjust the benefit when I slide backwards? Our funded ratio in 1 year, despite smoothing, went from 70%, just over 70%, to 59% in 1 year. Managing the liability over time is critical. Making a payment of this size is significant. From a funding standpoint, the most significant of the things that we have done. Therefore, I don't dismiss the need for having a discussion about a COLA, but it needs to be expressly paid for, not paid for by reducing a contribution and then further increasing the liability and saying going from a $5 billion liability to a 5.25 or 5.3 liability is not an issue, because it is, and we just have to recognize that as we go forward. So with that, I do really appreciate the discussion. It is an important one to continue to have on if and how we handle these things, on how we have intergenerational equity both in the taxpayer and our employee benefits that we can sustain. And body, I thank you for your time, and I do oppose the amendment. I'm sure that wasn't very clear. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, Representative Hsu, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the body for the discussion. I do agree. I think everybody in this room agrees that this is a crucial issue for our retirees in the state. I do just want to reiterate one more time that even without the $746 million, our CAPERS is going to be in excellent position, over 80% funded. And so once you get to that point, it's all about our job as the appropriators decide how we want to spend that money, what our constituents are asking for. And I guarantee you all of us in this room have received emails asking for a COLA. So we will be able to get our retirees their first COLA since 1998 in the midst of gas prices increasing, in the midst of inflation. I don't want to have to go home and look my retirees in the eye and have them asking me, what did you do for me while this was happening, and then have a COLA be voted down. And I also want to iterate that the fiscal note of this amendment is $500 million less than the fiscal note of the base bill. $500 million goes a long way, and if that number sounds familiar to you, that's because that's about how much the food sales tax bill will cost as well. So with this, we improve our chances of getting a sustainable food sales tax bill reduction, in addition to a COLA for our retirees, and also pay off that layering payment, and still have a CAPERS in an excellent position. So with all of that said, I think this is a really good idea, and hope you support. I close.
You've heard the motion by Representative Hsu to amend. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. No. Noes appear to have it. Seeing 15 hands, a roll call is in order. Every member has an opportunity to vote. Has every member had the opportunity to vote? Clerk will close the roll. Does anyone wish to change their vote? Seeing none, yeas being 38, nays 79, the amendment fails. We're back on the bill. Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Chair recognizes Speaker Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Body, we have an opportunity this session to do some very special things. First time in our history, we've had the resources available to do great things for our state, to put us on a sustainable path. The challenge that we face this year is that we have elections for this body and for the second floor. So we must continue to rise above it and do its best for our constituents. We have the opportunity to do three things that will put us in a path forward that we all can be proud of and say we left this place better than we found it. This is step one of that. It's paying off our debt. Step two is put money into a rainy day, a bank account. And third is have sensible, sustainable tax reform. We do all those three things, we'll be very proud. We've heard a little bit about tax policy and priorities. We've heard about a $250 contribution to every single citizen or every taxpayer. If we add that money up, it's about $500 million. It's one time. If we put that money into capers, what we're doing right now, it's over $50 million a year for the entirety of the program. What makes more sense? Sure, there'll be emails that want $250 one time, but they're not held accountable for the entire system like we are. I'm so proud of the body of the work we've done on capers. Some of the ideas that we have rejected. 3 times we heard that we need to re-amortize. For only about $100 million a year of extra cash would have cost us $7 billion. We said no to that. Today we get a chance to say yes. Put $1 billion back into the system, get us above 80% for the first time. With that, I'd like to ask the carrier a few questions. Representative, we can't thank you enough for your work on capers since you've been here. Can you give us a little bit of history, please brief? Where was the caper system at when you first got involved and put all your energy behind this?
Well, thank you. As we mentioned, the downturn of just under 20% in 2009 put us at 59% funded, and then in 2011, when we were getting rolling, we hit 56% funded.
And where would this put us at after this bill passes and become law?
If this bill passes and the 746 went in addition, it would put us at 80.8 on our current numbers.
Thank you. That was it. I just want to take this time, I'm not sure if I can or can't do this, to thank our chair for all the work he's done on this issue. And if this is the last bill he carries on this floor, I'm not sure it is, maybe it's not, what a way to go out. From the conception of amount of time, 10, 12 years, he's put into this to have this be the final bill for capers. I'm excited to do that for him. We appreciate our chair. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Steve Johnson to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and a huge thank you, body. I appreciate that. I do want to say thank you to so many folks, regardless of where we are on each of the issues here. All of this was a team effort as I look to leaders on both sides of the aisle and who carried it years when I wasn't. I'd love to single out a number of people on that, but thank you for the help to move forward. And my parting comment would be, as you continue to work on the pension issue, if you just each time think of, as I commit additional cost, I know what the other side of the equation is, we'll continue to be in a good stead as we figure a balanced plan forward. But thank you for the discussion. Thank you for your work. And Mr. Chair, I'd move when the committee rises and reports that it report Senate Bill 421 favorable for passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Steve Johnson to report Senate Bill 421 favorable. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Next order of business is Senate Bill 286. To carry Senate Bill 286, Chair recognizes Representative Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Committee report is adopted. You may continue.
Thank you. House substitute for Senate Bill 286 extends the expiration date for some of the provisions in our governmental response to the COVID-19 pandemic. These were all provisions that we put into place early on in the pandemic and then subsequently extended over the past few years a couple of times, in fact. If we do not pass Senate Bill 286 today, these provisions would sunset on March 31st, 2022. If the bill is passed, though, we extend these sunsets out to January 20th of 2023. We use that date as that's the date we used earlier this year in House Bill 2477 when we gave flexibility to our adult care homes and our hospitals, flexibility to meet their staffing needs. So we tried to line that up with the same date of January 20th, 2023. What provisions we're extending relate to the expanded use of telemedicine, the use of hospital beds in non-hospital space, giving them some flexibility there. The same regarding bed usage by our critical access hospitals. And then the two pieces we heard most in committee, dealing with the immunity for civil liability for our healthcare providers related to the COVID-19 public health emergency, and then immunity from civil liability for COVID claims for businesses that are in substantial compliance with public health directives. Once again, these provisions are all things that you've heard before, you've either voted for or voted against before. If we do not pass this bill, they sunset on March 30th, 2022. When we were dealing with that bill, 2477 earlier in the session, we were hearing from the proponents of this bill that they thought it was important that we extend it out until early next session. Hopefully by then we are done talking about COVID. We won't need these extensions again. And so my hope is this is the last time you hear me up here talking about these provisions. Mr. Chair, before I stand for questions, I do have one technical amendment.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
Page 1 in the title and line 2 after the semicolon by striking the second, extending the.
Would you like to explain your amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In the second line of the bill, in the title, it has the words extending the repeated twice. So it says extending the, extending the. We only needed one extending the, so this amendment would strike the extra one. I'll stand for questions.
All right. Does anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lawyers get paid by the word, so I oppose this amendment.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Patton, you may close on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I close and move my amendment.
You've heard the motion to amend. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Amendment passes. We're back on the bill. Chair recognizes Representative Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the carrier stand for a couple of quick questions?
Happy to.
Draw your attention to page 2 of the bill, section 3, starting on line 35. This is the section that essentially extends the immunity from suit and administrative fines for hospitals and other healthcare providers.
Yes, I see that.
And there was some conversation between representatives from the state's hospitals and yourself about maybe some tweaks to that language that they would like to have seen.
Yeah, leading up, in fact, I think prior to the hearing, there was some discussion between the Hospital Association and at least me and maybe some other members about changing that language a little bit. Initially, I thought they were going to bring that up in testimony, but we did not hear it then.
And did you have any conversation about why that language was not brought up to the committee?
No, I know there were some concerns that some groups may oppose it if we added that language in, but that's really the end of the discussion that I was involved in.
And if you could you speak to the point of that amendment? What was it that they were hoping to accomplish with amending that language into the bill?
You know, I don't have that in front of me, but I'm pretty certain that they were just hoping we were able to expand it a little bit more to catch other potential cases that might be filed based upon, you know, COVID or implications of COVID that are implicating, impacting other areas of the healthcare profession.
Thank you. I asked the chairman when we were getting ready for this bill, as we often do, talk with our chairs about the bills that are coming before us, and he talked about this amendment. I asked if I could see it, took a look at it. I think it does improve the product, and therefore I do have an amendment to add in that language requested by the hospitals.
The amendment appears short. The clerk will read.
Page 2, line 38, by striking the second four and inserting that arise out of or relate to. In line 40, by striking all after the third comma. In line 41, by striking all before to and inserting related.
Would you like to explain your amendment further?
So these are two very small changes in terms of the number of words and what they change, but essentially we go from a provision that is very narrowly drafted about escaping liability for damages, administrative fines, or penalties, and we change for to that arise out of or relate to acts, omissions, healthcare decisions, or the rendering or the failure to render healthcare services, including services that are altered, delayed, or withheld. And we change it to related to the COVID-19 public health emergency. The goal of the amendment is to broaden the protection provided to our healthcare providers, as we've seen with the two strains that came through Kansas this year that put an incredible strain on our healthcare system. Tough decisions had to be made, not all of them directly for COVID patients, some of them because hospitals were inundated with COVID patients and it affected the level of care that were given to others. Sometimes there were comorbidities and treatments that might have to be changed because a patient had two conditions, and we want to make sure that we broaden the scope of liability protection for our healthcare providers as they've been stressed in dealing with this pandemic, and that's what the amendment does. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
For further discussion on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We hear a lot in this chamber about respecting the committee process. This is blatant disrespect for the committee process. There wasn't any amendment in committee to do what this floor amendment does. In fact, the Hospital Association did confer with some members of the committee, at least I know they conferred with me. We discussed the relative merits of the idea of expanding immunity for healthcare providers. They didn't bring their amendment. Had their amendment been made known to the committee, there undoubtedly would have been testimony on the point. We are going to have to back up a year or so. When we were truly in the midst of a crisis, there were difficult decisions and hard compromises made concerning this legislation. A number of people from very disparate positions came together on the exact language that we passed now over a year ago to deal with this emergency. My recollection, I believe, is that the Speaker Pro Tem spoke loudly and passionately in favor of that compromise legislation. We have now gone for better than a year and a half. I have yet to have anyone show me that there has been any lawsuit filed regarding COVID in the healthcare professions. The reason for that, of course, is that the standard of care applicable to healthcare providers is the same standard of care that's applicable to lawyers like me, architects, accountants, engineers, police officers. And that standard of care is dependent upon the circumstances that are then existent. In other words, in the midst of a pandemic, when there is a shortage of hospital beds, when there is a shortage of personnel to provide medical care, no one would expect to receive the same standard of care in the midst of an emergency that you would expect to receive on a normal day at a hospital. And that's why there hasn't been any litigation. But you see, we didn't have a chance in committee to vet this change because it is an important change. It turns the rules of proximate cause on their head. Proximate cause is the linking of a negligent act with damages suffered by a person described as the plaintiff. The frequently used expression is a direct and proximate cause. In other words, the plaintiff's damage must be directly and proximately caused by the negligence of the defendant. This broad grant of immunity proposed by the Speaker Pro Tem is something very, very different. I would argue that its phraseology is unknown to the law. It is a broad grant of authority for healthcare providers to injure people. And it's not based upon the accepted standards in American jurisprudence. It's based on a request by a special interest group to be treated differently than other professions. It's special interest legislation brought to you in complete violation and disregard of the committee process, which we so fervently revere around here. So you can go vote for this. I would dare say that probably few, if any, in this room really know what this means. But since it's offered by Republican leadership, my presumption is it'll pass. I'd like to spend more time talking to you about this, but I see that the hour is late. And I see from your faces that I doubt that I'm going to convince a majority of this chamber to stand up to autocratic and totalitarian leadership who thinks the rules don't apply to them. So I urge you to vote no on this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Lee.
Well, here I am, gonna stand. You know, one of the things that I've been told repeatedly up here is that, Tatum, you just don't understand the process. And what they really mean to say is that you don't understand that the lobbyists run things. That's what they actually mean. And you know, here's the reality. The reality is that people deserve transparency. And when they go into the hospital, they expect that they're going to be taken care of, and that if there's something that happens to go wrong, that'll be rectified later. And I'm just tired. We use COVID as an excuse to give nursing homes immunity, to give hospitals immunity. But at the end of the day, where does that leave the people? I didn't like the nursing home immunity bill. I don't like this bill. You know, there was an instance in Ness City where there was a man dying of COVID. And his family asked for ivermectin and the off-label drugs. And the hospital wouldn't give it to him. And he about died. And they got on the news and they told the story, the hospital did, about, you know, this man dying and there's no beds and really created a crisis. We should be listening to the families when they say they want these off-label drugs, whether it's ivermectin or whatever. It's up to them. It's up to them to choose. They transferred him to Garden City, they gave him ivermectin, and he lived. Amazing. And yet, if he would have died in the hospital in Ness City, even though there were treatment available, the hospital would have claimed, oh, it's not our fault. When there are life-giving drugs available for patients and we deny them, and then they die anyway, that's on the hospital. I am tired of this chamber dancing for the lobbyists. It's time we do our job and stand up for the people. Thank you.
For further discussion on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Howe.
Mr. Chair, would the carrier of the amendment stand for a question? How would this amendment affect any pending litigation in the system?
Well, this provision would apply to the bill going forward. It would not apply to pending litigation.
Okay, so if there is pending litigation, this amendment would not affect something that has occurred and is being disputed in the courts currently.
I believe that would be correct.
Thank you. The reason I asked that is had some constituents in my district, a family. There's been some allegations against the local hospital about denial of care based on vaccine status. I can't verify if those allegations are true or not, but I just wanted to make sure I understood correctly how this amendment could or could not impact them and their pursuit of grievances in the courts. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Chair recognizes Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciated that last question, but it didn't go far enough. If the carrier would respond a little further. He couched his question in terms of pending litigation. Would you clarify when this language becomes effective in terms of cases that may have arisen but aren't in litigation? In other words, the arising of a cause of action.
Well, that is part of what will be litigated, but there are provisions of the various KEMA bills that we have passed over the last several months, some of which are retroactive, some of which are not. This section would not be retroactive as presented.
Well, help me out then, because based on that answer, I'm confused because I understood the explanation of the amendment was to provide protection to the institutions who suffered through this previous period of high activity. You understand my question?
Simple reality is nobody sitting in this room or the gallery or watching us at home can predict the future, and we don't know what's going to happen. What we have seen is that the way COVID outbreaks have changed from the beginning of the pandemic through what has happened in the last year. And I believe if we can afford that extra modicum of protection, since we know that the strains that have arisen over the last year or so have been more transmissible and could lead to similar situations where the healthcare system is stressed, that putting this provision in the bill is helpful. If we see that situation arises again, as the previous representative asked and trying not to upset the apple cart of cases that may currently be ongoing, even though the representative 2 speakers ago doesn't think there are any. So I have a hard time seeing the harm. This would strike a balance between not going back in time too far, but in recognizing our immediate history and trying to create a safety net for the future.
Well, I oppose the amendment. When someone's injured, it's pretty simple for me. When someone's injured through someone else's negligence, the sufferer, the victim, should not be the victim. As far as offering this amendment on the floor in this fashion, I go back to my friend's comments from Sedgwick. This is not how you pass, should pass legislation of this nature. It should be offered up in a bill. It should have full hearings. All sides should be present. And since we're not addressing anything that's occurred in the past, I see no reason why we can't go through the conventional process, offer such a proposal up in the ordinary course of things, and fully evaluate how it will apply to the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Finch, you may close.
Mr. Chair, just a couple of things in closing. We've been compared to the evil empire by one of the speakers today with our autocratic leadership style, the one that just allowed for a long and lengthy debate on a COLA for capers, which was not brought in committee. And so if we're offending the committee process, maybe what's good for the goose is good for the gander. This is, as one of our former members said, his favorite committee, the Committee of the Whole. And members have a right to bring their amendments here and have them debated and considered. No one's twisting your arm. It's just an option to present this to you. Your choice to vote it up or down, but I would encourage you to vote it up to assist our hospitals as they've assisted us throughout this terrible pandemic. They've saved lives. They've made people well again. They've worked hard. And if they commit gross, willful, or wanton conduct that hurts someone, there is a remedy, even under this bill. But for the simple claims that arise because they were busy trying to deal with a pandemic, something may have been overlooked, or a suit is brought frivolously, this is an opportunity for us to expand the protection given to our hospitals. It's not about their lobbyists. I have a hospital in my community. It's about the men and women who work there, the good they do in our community, and trying to give them some protection. So I hope that you'll join me in voting yes on this amendment. With that, I close and move my amendment, Mr. Chairman.
You've heard the motion to amend. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. No. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. I've already ruled. Chair recognizes Representative Hawkins.
That roll call was just a hair too late. Would the carrier stand for a couple of questions? I can't remember the last time I come up here and got to ask a question, so this will be a fun day for me.
It's not my first bill.
It's not. Does your bill deal with healthcare specifically?
Yeah, sure it does. A couple spots.
And it also deals with facilities and staff as part of the bill?
Yes, the immunity provisions deal with healthcare providers, which yes.
Okay. Well, I think those are the two questions I needed answered.
Okay.
So I actually had a bill come to a committee that I happen to chair. I was actually surprised when it came. It was actually, bill number was 2620. And although I would absolutely love to vet this bill and to hear it, really wasn't enough time for me to do that. But I do know that it was vetted in another committee. That bill actually came from the Judiciary Committee, so it has been vetted very well. And I just can't imagine a better amendment that will make this bill a whole lot better than what it is right now. So I have an amendment.
Would you like to explain your amendment?
Sure, it'd probably be easier for me to explain than to have the clerk read. First off, this bill actually just does a few things. I want to start out by saying if the lobbyists ran this place, they probably wouldn't get this bill. But the lobbyists don't run this place. So we're going to get a chance at this bill through an amendment. Basically what the bill did that was in committee and is now an amendment, it would create the crime of interference with the conduct of a hospital, which would be defined as conduct at or in a hospital so as to knowingly deny an employee of the hospital to enter, to use the facility of, or to leave any such hospital. Knowingly impeding any employee of a hospital from the performance of such employee's duties or activities through the use of restraint, abduction, coercion, or intimidation, or by force and violence of threat thereof, and also knowingly refusing to leave a hospital upon being requested to leave by the employee charged with maintaining order in such hospital. In addition, the bill would create a crime of aggravated interference with the conduct of a hospital, which would be defined as any of the above conduct when in possession of any weapon, included in the crimes of criminal use of weapons or criminal carrying of a weapon. And then lastly, battery against a healthcare provider would be a Class A misdemeanor. So it's a very specific bill meant to hopefully protect hospital employees from some of the abuses that occur. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Is there objection to waiving the reading of the amendment? Seeing no objection. Does anyone wish to speak to the amendment? Chair recognizes Representative Featherstone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to take this opportunity to let the body know that this bill was thoroughly vetted. It had 19 bipartisan sponsors that represented those connected to healthcare, those connected to law enforcement, and those connected to wanting to show support for our hospital workers and to hold those accountable who choose to attack them responsible for their actions. Those who worked most closely on this bill was Kansas law enforcement in the form of Ed Klump, Tara Mays with the Kansas Hospital Association, the District Attorneys Association, directly with Steve Howe from Johnson County. The day of testimony, I would say we had at least a dozen nurses, doctors, security personnel get up and tell story after story of people attacked at work in the hospital. So why are hospitals special that they should get extra protection? Because hospitals, by law, must see every person that comes in their door. And they want to see every one of those people. But they need a safe environment to provide care. Violence in the hospital affects patient care. The story that stands out most to me from that day, which was frankly horrifying to have to listen to, a nurse, I can't even remember what ER she was in, attacked by a patient. She was a new mother. She's attacked by a patient. I think she had to finish her shift because shift workers, you got to keep things staffed. Once she was evaluated, she had multiple injuries. She had a concussion. She was out of work for at least a month. She couldn't pick up her newborn infant for weeks. Her newborn. The stress of the incident made her unable to breastfeed her child. So you imagine if your work rendered you unable to feed your child or pick them up. And it was story after story on this. This bill is not only about trying to reduce violence in the hospitals, it is about holding people accountable. Of course, the courts can account for those whose actions may be the result of a mental illness, and I would trust the courts to do that. But I would just really implore you to support this amendment and support our hospital workers who have had a horrible, horrible year. And even before this horrible year started, nurses in the hospitals were reporting being attacked. 70% of nurses attacked at work. Nearly 50% of doctors, this is pre-COVID, reported being attacked at work. I don't know about you. I work with kids, so I don't get attacked. If I had a workplace that I had a 70% chance of being attacked, I wouldn't want to be there. Our hospitals are struggling now to maintain staff. I wouldn't be sitting around in a job where I was a sitting duck. So let's take this chance and support our workforce and support our hospitals. Thank you.
Further discussion, Chair recognizes Representative Keither.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of this amendment. For many, many years, this kind of law has been proposed and never really gotten anywhere because the penalty was causing a problem and heartache for a whole lot of people. So getting it down to a misdemeanor made it much more palatable to most of us. And this is an issue that has gone back and forth between Corrections and Juvenile Justice Committee and Judiciary, back and forth, back and forth. So when this one came this year, I was proud to support it, and I hope you will too, and appreciate the time. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Hawkins, you may close.
Thank you, body, for indulging me with the amendment. I close.
You've heard the motion by Representative Hawkins to amend. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. We are back on the bill. Chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the privileges or duties of being the ranking member of a committee is that when amendments are offered on the floor that were unanticipated, you sometimes need to come up and at least suggest to your caucus what you think they ought to do. I try to avoid standing up here and saying, I will leave it to the will of the body or vote your district. But, you know, there's good and there's bad about this bill now. And so I'll leave it to the will of the body. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Patton, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Body, I appreciate you creating the first judiciary bundle for the year. We'll have more of these for you later in the session. With that said, I move that when the committee rises and report House Substitute for Senate Bill 286 favorably for passage as amended.
You've heard the motion by Representative Patton to report House Substitute for Senate Bill 286 favorable. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. Now that we've went through leaders bring your amendments to work day, we'll go on to the next bill, House Bill 2466. For purpose of carrying House Bill 2466, Chair recognizes Representative Hubert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. The committee report is adopted. You may continue.
We've had a lot of great debate today, a lot of great topics. I would argue that 2466 is as important as any of them. It's a topic that's about our kids, our grandkids, about their education and the jobs of the future and the jobs of today. Computing science, it's not my passion. It's not, I was passionate about civics in last year's bill. This bill, though, is probably important in a way that, you just are going to have to help me with your local boards for us to do better on this topic, because 6 years ago, I think it was, I saw data on Kansas, and we're behind. 49th in the country, I think. I would like to give a shout out to Katie Hendrickson with code.org. She's helped me a lot. She's helped the Department of Education a lot in regards to what we need to do. 4 years ago, I had a bill that would allow for a computing science class to count as a science and math credit, which was priming the pump on how we teach computing science and increasing the opportunities for our kids. It took 3 years to get that approved, which the state board did in June. After doing that, I felt like there was more steps that should have been taken at that point. I heard from constituency groups that I had worked with in the past, and that was why last summer I started working on this bill. This bill is needed because we need teachers trained and classes offered. I modeled this bill after Arkansas, and Arkansas has done great things in regards to computing science. They're already at a graduation requirement. I had a graduation requirement in this bill because it's a roadmap to get us where we need to go. But I also recognize we're not even close to having that discussion, and that's why it was very easy. It was my plan all along to compromise back to where I am at right now with this bill. We have a bill that is good for the goose and the gander today. We can sing Kumbaya, and we can pass this bill. I believe we will. The state board is on board with it. Local school boards, the School Board Association, they're on board with it. And I have asked the School Board Association, even in the need to promote this bill at the local level, but you guys are all going to have to help as part of a marketing plan, a public relations campaign to get it done. I don't think next year we're going to get every school district in this state teaching computing science. We're just not. Scott Deloche at Kansas State University has a great program. When I did my press release this summer on this bill, I was contacted. They're excited. They have a program. It's ready to go right now. It's being utilized right now, but it needs to be marketed, and it needs to be promoted, and it needs to be put into our school districts right now. The provision in this bill that says if you don't, by the 23-24 school year, have a class being taught in your school district, you have to submit a report to the Department of Education on how you are going to accomplish that. Once we get these classes offered, we're going to start teaching those skills that our kids are going to need. 70% of all the new jobs that our kids and grandkids are going to need are going to require these skills. With that, I'm going to stand for questions. I have some things I'll say in closing as I wrap up. I'll try to be brief in doing that, but I do appreciate my committee was very willing to help get this bill out of committee, and again, I would stand for questions at this point in time.
Does anyone wish to speak on the bill? Representative Stogsdill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The state of Kansas faces a crisis as far as a teacher shortage goes. And we need to not only pass this bill, but look at this on a variety of different ways. We're not going to have enough teachers, especially in teach computer science, math, science, and so on this coming year. And this bill will certainly not solve that problem, but it starts that process. It's a good bill. It was passed out of committee unanimously, and I would urge your support for this bill. Thank you.
Further discussion, Chair recognizes Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of House Bill 2466.
and I want to commend our chairman for working a compromise that we could all agree on. We, as has said by the previous speaker, we have a shortage of teachers. It's only going to get worse. And the shortage in the field of computer science is probably as severe as any of those. What's good about this bill is it provides funding not only for new teachers, but it provides training for those teachers already in the field and who need additional training in computer science. So I ask for your support for 2466. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes Representative Helmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a previous teacher and counselor who worked on curriculum, and as I spoke this morning, curriculum is extremely important, and I know that we have to fit it in, and I worry about how this would fit in. Computer science is extremely important. I didn't have the computer science that I needed, and so I fumble and try and have to go for help and everything. So I think this is really, I encourage you to vote on this, but I also think that I worry because I've checked with WSU. WSU has cut courses. Oklahoma State has cut all their teaching courses. I like this bill because it's providing for some money for teaching courses, but I also know that we have to allow that when we force or mandate courses because of what I did with USD 259, we have to, if we mandate, we also have to allow that we can work those courses into that curriculum. And we can't say, you know, because there's only so many hours in a day, we can't say they have to have a mandated class to graduate, but yet not allow that they have something. Some schools are saying, well, you don't have to take science, and so you can take a computer course, and I would really not like to see that happen, because science, they get a lot of the mathematics, so I want to be sure that we're not doing something like that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, but otherwise, I really like the idea of this bill. Thank you for letting me speak.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Hubert, you may close.
I could say a lot more. I believe I have the votes to pass this bill. Conventional logic would say just close. I will tell you, I do need your help. You, in voting for this bill, are a part of my wolf pack. And you need to get involved promoting this issue with your local school boards. With that, Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and report House Bill 2466, favorable passage.
You've heard the motion by Representative Hubert to report House Bill 2466 favorable. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it. Motion passes. This concludes general orders. The chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes.
The clerk will read the committee report.
Speaker, your committee of the whole recommends House Bill 2462 and substitute for House Bill 2466 be passed. House substitute for Senate Bill 286, Senate Bill 2 and 421 be passed as amended.
Speaker recognizes Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the committee of the whole report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee report is adopted. Speaker recognizes Representative Hawkins for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to House Rule 2311, I move that an emergency be declared and that Senate Bill 2, House Bill 2462, Senate Bill 421, House substitute for Senate substitute, Senate Bill 286, and House Bill 2466 be advanced to that order of business, final action on bills and concurrent resolutions.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Motion carries. Final action, the clerk will read.
Senate Bill number 2 by Senator McGinn, an act concerning alcoholic liquor relating to the Kansas State Fair, sales during the state fair, issuance of temporary permits, liquor enforcement tax, and liquor drink tax, crediting a portion of such tax monies collected to the state fair capital improvement fund.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 2. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? Seeing none, the clerk will close the roll. With 87 voted in favor and 31 against the passage of Senate Bill 2, the same have received a constitutional majority of the bills hereby declared passed. The clerk will record a vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2462 by Representative Victors, an act concerning the Joint Committees on State-Tribal Relations, removing the requirement that members be selected from the membership of certain standing committees.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2462. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 118 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of House Bill 2462, the same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. Clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
Senate Bill 421 by the Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning the Kansas Public Employees Retirement System, eliminating certain level dollar employer contribution payments, making concerning appropriations for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022 for the Department of Education, relating to certain employer contribution payments, authorizing certain transfers from the State General Fund to the Kansas Public Employees Retirement Fund.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 421. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 113 voted in favor and 5 against the passage of Senate Bill 421, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record a vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Substitute for Senate Bill number 286 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning the governmental response to the COVID-19 pandemic in Kansas, extending the expanded use of telemedicine and expiring such provisions, extending the suspension of certain requirements related to medical care facilities, and expiring such provision, modifying the COVID-19 response and reopening for Business Liability Protection Act, extending immunity from civil liability for certain healthcare providers, certain persons conducting business in the state, and covered facilities for COVID-19 claims until January 20, 2023.
This constitutes final action on Senate Bill 286. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Representative Heiberger for an explanation.
Can you hear me? Is that working? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I vote no for a couple of reasons. One, I really don't like the way the amendment was brought on the underlying bill. And two, if HB 2620 was brought as a standalone bill, I would have passed instead of voted no. I really admire the work of the representative from Johnson County on this issue. We heard horrific stories in committee about things that are happening to our healthcare workers. But we were told that this bill will add additional protection for our healthcare workers, and it won't. I don't believe so. If I believed that, I would support it in a heartbeat. What this will do is, the problem is a prosecution problem. Prosecutors aren't prosecuting these things. This will send a gesture to our healthcare worker, but if you look at our battery statute, there are already about a dozen pages of gestures. And so I don't think we need to add another one. Thank you.
Representative Mason votes aye. Further explanation of vote. With 102 voted in favor and 17 against the passage of Senate Bill 286, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
Substitute for House Bill number 2466 by the Committee on Education. An act concerning education, enacting the Promoting Advancement in Computing Knowledge Act relating to computer science courses of instruction in high schools, establishing the Computer Science Educator Program, authorizing scholarship awards to licensed and pre-service teachers taking computer science courses.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2466. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 115 voted in favor and 4 against the passage of House Bill 2466, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Reports of standing committees, the clerk will read.
Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2556 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Local Government recommends House Bill 2676 be amended. The bill be passed as amended.
Are there announcements? Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Joint Administrative Rules and Regulations Committee meeting today has been canceled since it was at noon. It will be now held on Monday at noon with a place to be determined. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Schreiber.
Colleagues, today's the final day to sign on to the resolution recognizing the Kansas Master Teachers classes of 2020 and 2022. I've got it back here on my desk here, but then I'll have it in my office at 149 South if you'd like to sign on. We'll be recognizing them here in the chamber on next Tuesday. Thank you.
Representative Prael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Transportation will meet about 25 minutes till 2. We'll have a presentation, then we will work the 2 bills that we were going to work tomorrow. So see you in just a few minutes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Higher ed budget, we will meet at 1:45 today. Thank you.
Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Corrections, we will meet at 1:45 today. Thank you.
Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just one more reminder that I have on my desk, if anyone would like to sign up for the St. Patrick's Day recognition next Thursday. So it'll be on my desk for the next few minutes and then down in my room, 166 West. Thank you.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you. Johnson County delegation members, remember to mark your calendar for Monday at noon in 142 South. We will be hearing from our old friend, Sean Sullivan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Will Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been a while since social services budget met, but we will be meeting at 3:30 today, so don't forget, we're going to be working a bill. Thank you.
Representative Landwehr.
Health and Human Services will start meeting at 1:45 today, no meeting tomorrow. If you've seen the agenda that's out, it shows on the call of the chair next week. Just keep your ears open because we've got bills, but we're trying to get them in so we can work them and get them kicked out before Friday, our deadline.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Attention, commerce fans. We will start 10 minutes from adjournment, and we will hear the ban on the plastic bag ban bill. Thanks.
Representative, you might want to go about effort title Grandmother Kincannon. I said Grandmother Kincannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Children and seniors will meet at 10 minutes after adjournment, and Friday, the Joint Committee on Child Welfare Oversight is meeting at 9 o'clock. I think the agenda goes till 3:30 or 4, so we'll meet all day in room 112 North. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further announcements? Majority Leader Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Body. We have weather coming in, a lot of weather, they're saying. They're talking about possibility of 7 inches of snow tonight. So therefore, we're going to take a little different action and make sure that everybody stays safe. We do want everyone to know that if your committee does want to meet tomorrow, they certainly can. Doesn't sound like many will meet, but if there could be a WebEx or something, they can meet. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Friday, March 11th, 9 a.m. pro forma.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We are adjourned.